Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Before I call for a motion to enter into executive session, I just want to note that, as you all know, this past Friday, Commissioner Batra tendered his resignation from the commission. We have been notified by Senator Sampson's staff that the resignation was accepted, and we will be notified as to Commissioner Batra's replacement. So,
may I be heard?
Yes, of course.
I'd like to just raise a point or two. Perhaps do they hear me?
I think they hear you.
Perhaps make a motion. What's Elizabeth? I can't speak if you got all that stuff in my
Public
face.
meeting, we need to hear what you have to say because it's important.
As the commission is aware, there's been a lot of press, and I've read that press, so have all of you. And I say that virtually every press column report has been inaccurate. Inaccurate. And it is so because they are based upon quote unquote, I'll call them leaks. I don't know where the so-called information is coming from. But the inaccuracy is sort of created issues, at least in my mind, that I wanted to raise this morning. And of course, late Friday, the governor spokesman issued a press statement, a press release, which I thought was unfortunate because the tune and the tone of that press release was coercive and threatening. Now, I am sure the governor himself had nothing to do with it. I don't think anybody can attribute that to him. In fact, I think the spokesperson, Mr. Velasco, didn't really mean what he said. We all have busy days and things move very quickly, and misstatements are made. I make them myself, and we all make them. Nonetheless, it has tended to all of these leaks and this press release has tended to create a cloud over this commission. It's tended to impugn its staff, its commissioners, and the commission itself. We're just public servants. The presumption is in the law that we act in good faith, and indeed we do. None of us comes here with a proxy to vote anything. I am an appointee of Assemblyman of the Speaker Silver. I can tell you I've never spoken to him or anybody in his office about anything concerning this matter. I come here to look at the facts, look at the law, and make a decision. We are judges. There are people out there who think things ought to move more quickly, less quickly. We look at the facts, we look at the law, and we make a decision. And as I was driving up here today, I was straining to figure out how this new commission in its infancy can have all of its integrity restored after this onslaught of leaks and press releases. And I come to the conclusion that what's before us today is a package that's been distributed to commissioners that deals basically not with the substance. It deals with procedure, with process. And I think that perhaps we ought to consider, I ask Madam Chair, I ask you, and I ask the commissioners to consider not closing this session, conducting it in public. Let the public see how we operate. If we have something to say, we'll say it. I'm not inhibited about anything I wish to say about this. Now, if there's some law or rule I am overlooking that the commission cannot deal with, that's one thing. And I'm not saying that this is a precedent and that we ought to do this in every investigation. Of course not. Perhaps the next session in this matter should be open or closed, but probably closed. But it's gotten to a point with all of these leaks that we ought to allow these people in and just see how we discuss the matter, how we deal with it. I think it's going to go pretty quickly, if you ask me. There's going to be no great issues to discuss. If I'm missing things, then we can take those issues into a confidential session, into a closed session. But I don't want to leave here again today, open the paper in the morning, and read about what happened in a closed session that is completely inaccurate, and again, have this commission that just came into being impugned, and its work impugned, and the people impugned, all the rumor that flies around. Now, if there's any way in which we can do this in a public session and let the sunlight in once and for all, I think we would go a long way in having all of these folks look at us with restored confidence that all we are doing is a public service. We're doing it in good faith. We're voting our consciences based on facts and law, and that's all this is about. And, Madam Chairperson, you can consider my statement as a motion, if you wish, and ask for a second. And if there's some reason why some part of our meeting today ought to be an executive session, that's fine with me. I'd be happy to hear about it. Otherwise, let's just have an open session and vote so nobody comes away with any misimpressions and misconceptions about what we do and how we do it.
Well, investigative matters have traditionally been conducted in executive session. They are permitted to be conducted in executive session. I think that is wholly appropriate that they be. I, for one, will not be making a motion to conduct the investigative portion of our proceedings today in executive session. It's not mine to determine, Commissioner, if I am accepting or want to consider yours as a motion. If you care to make that motion, you will, of course, know that you have every right to do that, and we'll see if there's a second and take a vote.
Well, I'd like if, Madam Chairperson, if the motion is seconded, to have some discussion about it, obviously, and have Ms. Bybin, who's really more knowledgeable than all of us about how this is all supposed to work. I am not all that knowledgeable about these procedures, and I seek guidance. I make the motion in the hope I will get it. And if there is a good reason, as I said earlier, let's hear it.
Okay, your motion, sir?
My motion is that we conduct whatever we came here to do in public session today. And if there is any part of it that needs to be conducted in executive session, that we do that. But for such parts or parts that can be done in public session, let these people hear what we've got to say.
Okay, I'll be calling for a second, and then we could have any discussion that people think is appropriate. Any second?
I think Commissioner Jacobs' comments are worthy of discussion, and I'll second it.
Okay, would you like to start that discussion, Commissioner Bulgaro?
I would like to hear, I have a comment, but I'd like to hear from other members of the group at this point, if there are any other comments.
Anyone else?
It would be helpful to me, Commissioner Bulgaro, if you explained your rationale for the second, so that if I decide I want to respond, I have the benefit of hearing your views.
Okay.
Hi, this is Ellen Yaroshevsky.
One moment.
Also seconded, if it matters, Mr. Horowitz, and I can provide a rationale as well, but perhaps you should hear from Commissioner Bulgaro first.
Thank you. Commissioner Bulgaro?
I likewise, have been troubled by press reports that were based on actions that I don't think occurred or did not occur as presented in most of the journalistic accounts I have. I think the fundamental reasons for the actions that were taken in executive session last time probably would have been understood and perhaps even treated favorably in press comments had they been released the last time, after last meeting. So for that reason, I think that all or a portion, or certainly the vote at least, on the matter before us today ought to be done in public session.
Commissioner Yarashevsky?
Yes. Chairman DeFiore, I don't think there's anything traditional about this meeting. I generally agree that, of course, investigative matters are conducted in executive session. But I think at this juncture, our independence and our integrity is at stake. We respect each other, and we respect the pledge of confidentiality we all took to protect victims, the accused, and our process. I wish everyone respected that, but apparently not. Once again, there are leaks, and I find it disturbing to personally be muzzled when unfounded rumors led to criticism and implicit threats. At the very least, I think the public ought to know the truth of what we decided at this meeting and at the last meeting. I understand that there may be matters here that should be dealt with in executive session because of the sensitive nature of the facts that are presented. However, I think it's incumbent upon us to publicly explain at the end of this meeting what it is we decided, because if there once again are leaks, as we predicted last time there would be, that there be no misunderstanding of what happened at our meeting. I think nothing less than our personal integrity and the integrity of JCOPE is at stake. I would also call for an investigation of the source of the leaks from the last meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Yarashevsky. Anyone else?
Madam Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Is that Commissioner DiOrio?
Yeah, Houston has been having a serious problem here in Westchester County, and I've missed some of what the conversation has been today. But would somebody please read back the motion that's on the floor so that I may have it completely?
Yes, sir. Monica?
I believe, and if I get this wrong, correct me, but the motion is to,
Speak up.
I believe that the motion is to conduct our proceeding today in the public session. I can elaborate on that, but it was based on concerns about the way that our past meeting was covered by the media and inaccuracies in that coverage.
I also think you should add leaks that caused the media inaccuracy.
Commissioner DiOrio, did you hear the motion?
I did. Thank you. I'd like to hear the other George.
We couldn't hear you. You'd like to do what? Okay.
Prefer to hear more of the conversation.
Anyone?
Yeah. Can you?
I think it's important that I just take a roll call for a moment. Present in the room with us today are obviously myself, Commissioner Hormozy, Commissioner Rath, Commissioner Horwitz, Commissioner Jacob, Commissioner Bulgaro. Appearing by Skype, my vision. Commissioner Weissman just entered. Appearing by Skype, I can't see that far, Ellen, so can you just record who is appearing by Skype?
Appearing by Skype is Commissioner DiOrio, Commissioner Yarashevsky, Commissioner Renzi, Commissioner Cavello, Commissioner Knox, and Commissioner Levine. Did I miss anybody?
Okay. Okay.
I will say, just initially, I think that we all have been concerned through the course of this commission's short life about information that has made it into the public domain, not just with this investigation, but with many of our investigations, including statements that were made in August about a matter that may or may not, in fact, have even been under investigation. And I think that many of us around this table are concerned about our ability to function in an independent way and with the integrity that I think the public expects from us. That having been said, there are some very practical concerns that I think we as a commission have to give some thought to, and it may bear that the staff may want to inform us on these things. And what I'm thinking about is, somebody mentioned before, I think Commissioner Yarashevsky mentioned the public policy behind confidentiality for our investigations, and referenced the need to be sensitive both to victims that may have suffered as a result of conduct that we may investigate, as well as the individuals or entities that we may choose to investigate. Putting that aside, there is a real-world practical aspect to opening up an investigation discussion, an investigation plan. Many of us around the table are former prosecutors, former judges. We understand how investigations, members of regulatory bodies like Commissioner Jacob, we understand that in order to conduct the proper, thorough investigation with integrity and the kind of confidence that the public expects from us, that to do so, notwithstanding the public's interest, strong interest in understanding whether at the end of the investigation there is a substantial basis to charge somebody with a violation of the public officers law, that the ability to conduct that investigation once the process is opened so that each step of the investigation is detailed can significantly impede our ability, if we decide that we are going to conduct an investigation, and the public's right to understand what happened. If we decide at this meeting that there are particular subpoenas that should be issued to particular individuals, to particular entities, I can't imagine, as somebody who spent 10 years as an investigative prosecutor in the Manhattan DA's office, being able to conduct the kind of thorough investigation with integrity and without compromise when the public is a part of that process. And again, I want to strongly emphasize that the kind of confidentiality that the legislature and the governor invested in the commission at this stage of the proceedings has its parallels in the grand jury process or in a regulatory body like the SEC that conducts non-public investigations, and when those investigations are complete, the body decides whether that's a grand jury, whether that's the Joint Commission on Public Ethics, whether that's the Securities and Exchange Commission. The body decides whether there is sufficient evidence to move forward. And at that point, charges are made public, and the public has an understanding of how those charges will go forward. And I think if we are going to have a discussion about whether these issues that Commissioner Jacob and the other members of the commission have raised, I think it's important that that aspect of our authority to conduct investigations be part of the discussion here.
I think what is before us in all these packages that have been distributed is a cut and dried issue. We all have the facts before us. And the question is how we're going to vote. If there is really going to be any discussion here that goes into details and facts about the acts and practices complained of, that's not what this meeting is about. We're at the very threshold of an investigative phase of a matter. Nobody can really say much about the facts at this point, except that the amount of facts we've accumulated to date. We merely have are going to vote on whether are those facts that are in these packages sufficient to predicate a substantial basis investigation on. We take a vote, because tomorrow, again, this is a very unusual case. Everything that's happened here has been very extraordinary. Sure, I was at the SEC for years, and Dan, Commissioner Horowitz, was at the DA's office. Never seen anything like it. So, as I said, I began to think about, since everything here that has happened to date is so extraordinary, is there a step we should take, albeit an extraordinary step, not precedential in any way, so that when we leave this room as a body, there's not going to be any leaks that John Milgren's going to have to deal with. Everyone will know what that vote was, because they're going to be here when we take it. Nobody's going to be accused of voting against, voting for, modifying the vote, whatever. We've had one commissioner resign over this already. Now, if we want a commission and we want to continue, this is a great body. The people here are a pleasure to work with. We're very collegial. We get along. We interact in a very, very scholarly and intelligent way, all of us. Except that when we finish a session, we go out, and all sorts of statements are imputed to people here that they never made. And the whole commission comes under a cloud. Now, we are in our infancy. The state needs this commission. We must restore the public's confidence in this commission, that it operates in the normal course, that the presumption that all of its members operate in good faith is not rebuttable. It is true. So I just don't hear from any of the persons who have spoken what impediment exists to going forward in a public way, because last time, as Commissioner Bulgaro said, we had a very esoteric and sophisticated legal discussion. By the time the session was over, what appeared in the press was horrible. It had nothing to do with what we were dealing with. And I've been striving to figure out, as Commissioner Bulgaro has said, how do you tell the world how we sat around a table for hours and in good faith strove to interpret the law and the facts properly, without being attacked for things that are wholly unjustified? So I make this motion only because I think this whole experiment is going to fall apart. We've already, as I say, lost one commissioner, and others have indicated a desire that they don't need the aggravation. So this is a great body. The state needs it, but it needs one in which the people, the press, have confidence in. And we can do that. But we got to stop hiding behind closed doors when it's unnecessary. That's all I am saying. And if somebody thinks it's necessary to do that today, tell me why. I have nothing that I am going to be reluctant to say or do in an open session. I don't think any of the other commissioners do. So, again, I made the motion. I've given, I hope, some response, however adequate, inadequate, to Commissioner Horowitz's inquiry, which I thought was a fair inquiry, and others have tried to respond as well. And Madam Chairperson, if you have anything to say, or you wish to call it to a vote.
Well, let me see if anyone else would care to weigh in.
Madam Chair, may I?
Please do, Judge.
I'd like to side with Commissioner Horowitz on the issue, and particularly because if I understood the motion, it is that we conduct our proceedings with respect to the issues before us in public session. I quite agree with all that is said with respect to what has been or leaked and how it got leaked and how we may have been misperceived and publicized with regard to the work we do. But it is true that the work that we do is of a very serious and a very sensitive and a very confidential nature. I would suggest that we consider doing that work in order to protect the confidentiality and the seriousness and the issues relating to individuals in our proceedings, but that subsequent to the proceeding, and having taken a position and a vote, that vote in some form or fashion be transmitted immediately to the public through the media or however else you choose to do it, so that there may be no misunderstanding what in fact happened as a matter of result, without jeopardizing the conversation and the individual rights of those people who are the subjects of our conversations. Now, I agree with the concern of Commissioner Jacobs and believe that, like all of us, we have been striving very hard to put together a responsible organization which will carry out the mission of the statutory scheme of JCOPE, which is a new, different, and quite unlike any other agency, whether it's the Securities and Exchange Commission or the Commission on Judicial Conduct or anything else. This is something new. And in that very same vein, we have been together for not a complete 9 months. Now, that period of gestation hasn't delivered the kind of baby perhaps that we want, but an awful lot of hard work, effort, and accomplishment and achievement has been brought to bear on the work of this commission by the individuals who are participating in it. And I think that if we look at one another, we begin to talk about ourselves with the appropriate pronouns, not I, me, or my, but we, us, and our. This is our agency. This is us. It is our responsibility, and we have an obligation to see to it that our work is not designed to please any one particular group, be it public officials, politicians, employees of the government. Our responsibility is to the other 19 millions of New Yorkers who are out there, hopefully the recipients of a process that will bring transparency to the government and a recognition of the need to continue a democratic government in the state of New York that is open, honest, and transparent. I caution, however, the discussion of those sensitive matters in open meeting, but I welcome the publication of the results of our deliberations. And that is how I believe it should be, and that's why I was in favor of what Dan has proposed and what his concerns are, and would ask you, Marvin, if you would, if you were to limit the motion with respect to reporting subsequent to the meeting, I certainly would be happy to endorse and support it as well.
Madam Chair. Okay.
Yes, Senator Rath?
I
Yeah.
defer to Commissioner Jacobs.
Well, I'm very interested because of all the misleading reports in the press release of last week that so profoundly affected us all, to sort of get on the public record what actually happened at our last session that was so misunderstood and mischaracterized. And at the moment, our hands are tied because confidentiality says you can't even talk about the esoterica of what occurred or the details. And perhaps if we just opened this session as a public matter and made it a public matter and took a vote publicly, I'm not talking about getting into the substance of the investigation. That's all in the package. We've all read that. If anybody really thinks they want to talk about what's in the package, they ought to raise their hand and tell us. I don't think I need to. This is just an investigation. And if you look in the 10Ks of the 10Qs of public corporations in this country, the fact that they are being investigated by agencies of government are recorded in those annual and quarterly reports. The fact that we are going to make a statement that we are commencing an investigation is not very unusual. If it is in this context, somebody's got to tell me why. But what is unusual is all this, or everything that accompanies every time we meet, accompanies the fact every time that when we meet behind closed doors, somehow never comes out right. So I'd like to have a public session. I'd like to just explain in simple terms. I don't think we're going to argue about it, but whatever happened cuts across all the investigations this commission has done and will do in the future. It was a procedural issue.
Commissioner Rath?
Judge Diorio makes a very good point about announcing our votes. Commissioner Jacobs' point about sunlight shining on our proceedings is critical, I believe. Had not our last session ended the way it did, I would have been extraordinarily disappointed in the amount of time and effort all of us have put in to try to shine light on state government. So again, the folks out there in New York State can feel that there's someone's watching the store, as it were. And that needs to be. Whether we can do that instantly today in the next hour or 2 hours, I'm not quite sure that the plan as to how we make that happen under the constraints of the legislation that put us in place. I'm not quite sure of that. But what I am sure of personally, that I will announce my vote I am used to coming from a body where you announce your vote and you stand up and explain your vote because that's what's expected of you. And seeing as that's where I came from, that's what I'm going to do today.
Okay. Anyone from the remote locations?
Yeah, David Renzi, if you can hear me. I hear what has been said, and quite honestly, I think what Vince and Mary Lou have put on the record, I think, is a fair compromise. I do think that it would allow, obviously this body to continue with in a closed session, which would obviously have all the benefits that Dan pointed out, but it would also allow light to be put on the process, and I do think it'd be important, given the media scrutiny in this matter, to have the full vote published, and I do think that's, frankly, a reasonable compromise, and I'd be in favor of that amendment to that motion.
Can I ask for a point of information?
Who is speaking?
Judge Delorio, your point of compromise suggests that we just say whether we vote on an investigation or not. That's the way I heard it. In my mind, that's not sufficient. I think, number one, that Jacob needs to issue a statement as to what was done at the last meeting. And secondly, that we come out of this meeting if, in fact, we authorize an investigation, that we specifically indicate the scope of that investigation, including whatever subpoenas we decide we will issue.
Thank you.
I don't know if that's a friendly amendment or not. I'm not sure if you intended that as part and parcel of your proposal.
Madam Chair, if I may, Marvin, I wasn't sure about your motion. Are you actually suggesting we report out what individuals or entities we voted yes or no for?
No, I don't really have great difference with Judge Diorio's amendment. I think that the bottom line fact is, as has been expressed, that an investigation was voted upon affirmatively, and what the vote was should certainly be a public matter. However, what I continue to be concerned about is this information out there that there was some effort last time to block investigations. I mean, that was horrible, and it was totally inaccurate, and we ought to lift lift the secrecy veil that protects that misinformation, that bad information, and correct the record, preserve the record. It's important that JCOPE as an entity and its integrity be kept intact. Nobody would come to this table ever to protect anybody. I haven't seen that since I've been on this commission. Nobody sat at this table attempting to block any investigation of anybody. And since the press reported that kind of thing, and a press release went out suggesting it, it's time to dispel it in the interests of the integrity of everyone on this, the staff, the commissioners, and the commission. That's all I'm saying. Apart from that, the bottom line can be voted out. We don't have to sit here with the press and cameras talking about the issue. We'll vote however we vote, and we will report out the bottom line. That's fine with me. But I do want, as Commissioner Bulgaro has said, to correct the record. Very important for everybody.
So, Commissioner, is your motion to report the resulting vote of today's deliberations on investigative matters, which will take place in the executive session?
Yes, with the proviso that the issue we discussed the last time we met, which cuts across all investigations that this commission has undertaken and will undertake, be made a matter of public record, so that this cloud doesn't hang over us, that somehow people came to the table and were voting things that they never voted.
Marvin, I agree with you, and Ellen, I'd like to address your remarks as well, if I may, please, Madam Chair.
Absolutely.
We're talking about two separate issues here. One has to do with the target of whether or not an investigation should or should not be entered into. It seems to me, with all that has been said and with all that we discussed, that's the easier question to answer. What is difficult to answer is trying to tie to that what we need to do in order to explain our purpose, our process, and have people understand and appreciate the accuracy of what we are doing and the need to report accurately the concerns and the decisions which we make. And we could use some very real attention in this latter regard. That's not a criticism of anybody, but it is important to establish the fact that publicly, without fear or favor or threats of any kind, this commission will do its work as required and mandated by the statute. And the stronger that statement is made, the more powerful it will become. And maybe this is a golden opportunity for us as commissioners to set straight the record of what it is that we're about and what we have come to be to ourselves as commissioners, what we have become with respect to our staff working to execute policy decisions of the commissioners. I think that you can't mix the two in one and the same bowl, but they both are important and they both need attention, and obviously we have the talent, in my judgment, and the ambition and the sincerity and dedication of people, both commissioners and staff, to see to it that it will be done.
So I'm sorry to be dense, but I don't understand, because I know that the criticism, and it's not just the press, there was a press release from the governor's spokesperson that, and I don't know if the governor had anything to do with it, that indicated that if the Silver appointees were seeking to block the investigation of Silver's office, then that would be a problem. And I don't want to violate confidentiality about the last meeting. I am very offended by that comment, as Commissioner Jacobs has pointed out. That's not what happened at the last meeting, and I'd like to know whether we come out of this with just a report of the investigation, or whether we make perfectly clear whether or not we are intending to examine what happened at the Speaker's office, at the Attorney General's office, at the Controller's office. That's my question. I think we have to, and I'd like to understand if people object to that, why they object to it.
Ellen, I have no objection to that. All I'm telling you or suggesting is that they are not like scrambled eggs. They don't cohere.
I understand. I agree.
They're two separate issues and need to be dealt with separately, I suggest. And I believe that we have the talent and the ambition to do that without concern or fear of whatever threats may or may not have been made. And whether they were or they weren't, it goes with the territory. When dealing with confidentiality, that has to happen because people are people and they're going to misread or read into as they choose. But we can deal with both of these, Ellen, and I am sure we will come out in pretty good order.
Thank you.
I agree with you, and so my question is that part of the motion? I don't understand what we're going to come out with.
We're going to reread the motion for you, Commissioner. And then, Commissioner Weissman, would you like to be heard?
Just
Looking for
to
the-
amplify on what Commissioner Yaroshevsky said, I believe the statement dealt with all legislative appointees as opposed to just assembly appointees. So, the statement that Commissioner Yaroshevsky alluded to,
George, speak up. They're saying they can't hear you.
the statement that Commissioner Yaroshevsky alluded to, I believe spoke to all legislative appointees, not only from one house or one segment of a house.
Okay, did you find the motion?
I believe that the motion is...
Speak up.
Sorry. I believe that the motion is to report the resulting vote on investigative matters that the commission will take up in executive session.
I think the motion was a bit more than that, if I may, Madam
Sure.
Chairperson.
Yes, please.
There was a second aspect to that motion, and that is that we state publicly or explain in public session the process issue, which I have said cuts across all investigations from the time this commission came into existence and for as long as it will be in existence because of the statute, and explain what the dispute was among commissioners, the discussion was among commissioners at the last session. I think we report out the final vote, but we also deem that discussion relevant to go public with it so that we preserve the integrity of everybody connected with this process.
I would agree with that, Commissioner, because
you.
I think that it was highly mischaracterized. I came away from that session feeling that the hope for this commission doing what we know we have to do, the way we know we have to do it, putting any past interests, partisan leanings behind us, that last session erased any concerns I had of that being a problem with this commission. And I agree with you. I think the public the public would welcome knowing that was the way we ended our last session, because certainly it was not what the impression was that got up there.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I have a question with respect to those people who are propounding this motion. I just am curious about mechanically, and I'm sorry to be in the weeds again with mechanical and common sense issues, but how do we relate the specifics of what was discussed in the course of a meeting that took several hours without a transcript? Are we going to recreate for the benefit of the press the various positions that commissioners took about various issues? Whatever they were, legal, substantive, factual, I'm not sure functionally how we go about achieving that which I understand Commissioners Jacob and Yaroshevsky hope to achieve here, because I don't understand how we could recreate the specifics of those discussions, which were nuanced, legalistic. There were people who took positions, hypothetically, of course we can't talk about what happened in the room, There were people who took positions about how an investigation might or might not proceed. I just don't understand how mechanically we have that discussion here today and feel that Judge DiOrio's motion, I think, really gets at what I understand the concern is with respect to the reputation and integrity of the commission. Actions speak louder than words. And if this commission does that which I expect every one of us expects it to do, that is going to send a very loud, very clear, very strong message to the world about what we intend to do with this. And if, as Judge DiOrio has suggested, and I agree with him, that there ought to be another time, a discussion about how it is that our internal discussions, not just in this matter, mind you, but in almost every matter that this commission has discussed or not discussed, because there have been times when we have not discussed things, and I see statements in the paper about what's happened that have been attributed, frankly, to people affiliated with this commission or formerly affiliated with this commission. So if we're going to have a discussion, and I believe that maybe we should have a discussion about how what we do gets characterized under a confidential setting, I think it needs to be a full discussion, and I would welcome that.
And I agree with Commissioners Horowitz, DiOrio, and with Commissioner Rath. And I think that, of course, it's unfortunate when our actions are not accurately reported out. But we are an important body, and we have important work that we deliberate and consider here. And we have to be disciplined, we have to be patient, and we cannot be overly reactive to things that we don't have control over. And I, for one, think that Judge DiOrio's suggestion is an excellent one and strikes an excellent balance, that we retire to deliberate and discuss in detail and at length if that is necessary, and for some of us that may be, before we take our vote. And then when we emerge from our executive session, we report out what the result of that vote was.
Just one comment, just addressing Commissioner Horowitz. Perhaps we are being misunderstood. What I am talking about is a very dry legal issue. It has nothing to do with persons and has everything to do with every investigation. It cuts across, I keep saying it cuts across all investigations. It is a dry legal issue. And if you try me, I can assure you I can explain it very quickly. And it has nothing to do, as I say, with the acts and practices of A or B or C, people under investigation. It's going to come up again next month, 6 months from now, but it happens to have come up in this particular matter. That's all that happened last time. All the rest is not something I have any interest. I don't even recollect all the rest in any detail, but I do recall that legal issue. It was a very, very dry one and a straightforward one. I'd like to put it on the record. It's a recurring issue, and it isn't going to hurt anything or anybody. On the contrary, it will clear the air, as you have said. Just clear the air.
Well, again, I don't want to belabor this. I just don't understand how, in the course of a 2-hour meeting, we can crystallize the views of the 13 or 14 commissioners that attended a meeting into a precise, narrow legal issue. And I don't want to get into that now because I have a different recollection of that meeting and how it was conducted. And so I feel, again, actions speak louder than words, and I think we should follow Commissioner DiOrio's recommendation and Commissioner Rath's view that we should take a vote and make that public and move on with our business.
Thank you. Commissioner Hormozy? One moment, please. One moment. Commissioner Hormozy has the floor.
So, Marvin, my question is, I did not attend the last session.
You're at a serious disadvantage.
But
Or not.
my question is, right, okay, missed a lot. Is it really one small legal issue?
Yeah.
Or is it
Yes.
something more complex? And
just
has
has
the
to do-
commission as the whole, hold on, let me finish, have all the commissioners agreed to what the answer to that legal issue is? Because what I found from prior commission meetings is there is very substantive and esoteric talk about items, and sometimes they're put to, let's think about it, let's do more research, and I think facts often get interwoven into specific questions. So I agree, to the extent there was a resolution that was backed by all the commissioners, then that's something we can and should discuss and put forth publicly. To the extent that's not everyone's recollection and that's not what happened, why not just deal with what's before us today regarding the investigation we're here for, and then at a separate time when all heads are cooler, I missed all the
Very cool.
drama, come up with what the JCOP believes the substantive process should be for
Commissioner,
investigations, to the extent that we're struggling with some of that right now.
very difficult for you to address this because, as you say, you were not at the last meeting, but I don't want to usurp the podium here.
May I?
Yes, Commissioner Bulgaro.
The answer, I think, to the question of why it's important to address it is because it's a matter of it's a legal matter, and there was perhaps a discussion and not full agreement on the meaning of a statutory provision, and much of the discussion focused on that. That would clarify, I think, just by stating what it is, what the issue was, what occurred last meeting, even if it can't be resolved, and it's probably not going to be resolved today. It's going to have to be resolved with further deliberation. So I think that's the reason.
Yeah. I share Mitra's
put this
view.
together.
I think Mitra's right on the money. Commissioner Yaroshevsky?
Yes. Mitra, my head's very cool. In fact, I have a head cold, so I'm fine. I listened to this, Dan, and you're our wordsmith. You're good at drafting a paragraph. I can see that we could write 2 sentences about what happened. I don't understand why publicly we're pussyfooting around this. It is a technical legal issue where the commission has a disagreement about the meaning of a technical process. That's all that's going on here. Why don't we now say what it is and put it on the record? It's not a big deal.
Anyone else? George, are you...
I'm okay, Madam Chair.
Well, we have 2 motions that have been proposed, one by Commissioner Jacob and a sort of compromise motion put on the table by Commissioner DiOrio. I'll be calling for a second for either one of those.
I'll second Commissioner DiOrio's motion.
I think we got a second on Mr. Jacobs.
Okay, so let's go through. There's a second now on Commissioner Jacobs' motion, which is, now let's make sure we understand exactly what the motion is. Commissioner?
The result of today's session, and I believe, according to Commissioner DiOrio's compromise, he'd like to have a discussion on that in executive session. I don't disagree, but the conclusion should be stated in a public statement at the conclusion of our executive session. The other aspect is that we explain as well in a public session the narrow legal issue that was discussed at the last meeting that gave rise to all the misinformation out there in the press release. So that's the 2 parts of my motion to you.
Yes.
Okay, so there's a second. Any in favor?
Someone hand vote?
Yeah, hand vote,
Which
please.
motion?
For Commissioner Jacobs' motion.
May I ask one last
Yes,
question on
of course.
Commissioner Jacobs? Commissioner Jacobs, do you want that public statement of what occurred at the last session? Is that something that you want to occur today, or is it something that, as Commissioner Yaroshelski said, is something we should be drafting and that we publish at a later time when there's consensus on what
No,
was said?
I'd like it to come out today, in fact, before we leave this room. I'd like to just state what happened, and I don't think there'll be a quarrel over what happened. There'll be a dispute over it. It was a narrow legal issue. People may come out differently on what the statute means, but that's all it was about.
So does it not suffice to just state that there was a discussion and a divergence of opinions without being specific?
Nope.
Okay.
Not in my opinion, at least. With all respect, I think you have to be very, very specific about what was discussed because it ties to what the conclusion was. And there's no individuals involved. Tomorrow we will be doing another investigation. It'll be a recurring issue. Why not handle it in public?
The only thing, I think people know where I'm going to come out on this issue. Just to reiterate, to reduce this to a one-sentence formulation of legalese, I must say, will not give justice to the color of the discussion and the tenor of it and the views that were expressed. Because to understand the legalese, I think the public needs to understand the legislative history of this decision and how commissioners viewed the process and the color around how we view how our statutes work. So again, we're already in the middle of a vote. Frankly, I'm not even sure I understand how we could be voting on something without even having the language of what we're voting on, which is, I think, goes to what Mitra was talking about. That certainly would be a departure from our procedure, and there are members of this commission who rightfully have been vigilant about making sure that we have precision in our motions and our amendments. Questions about oral motions and what did we vote on and where is the writing. So we're all giggling, and rightfully so. But I think it's a serious point. We're being asked to vote on something.
Dan Tiff, since everyone's looking at me, I think we have some scribes up here who are writing this stuff down and reading it back. So I think that's the answer to your question.
Okay, we're in the middle of the vote.
Yeah, we're in the
Are there any in favor of Commissioner Jacobs' motion? 1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
4. Are there any opposed?
Well, I didn't mean.
what about-
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, you-
I didn't see
Did
anyone.
you count me?
I can't see this
Yaroshelski.
guy.
Commissioner Yaroshelski?
I'm voting in favor.
Anyone else on Skype? Okay. Any opposed? And we have Commissioner
Levine.
Levine.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed. Who else? Call them out because I can't see them. Call out the names.
Renzi was opposed. Commissioner Levine was opposed.
I'm missing 3.
Ellen's hand is still up as
No, she should put her. Yeah. Diorio is opposed. Commissioner Horwitz opposed.
I'm
No.
missing.
Who
What about
was it?
Cabello?
Commissioner
Commissioner
Horwitz. Commissioner Carvello, I cannot see. John, can you tell me?
Can't see me?
We can't see your vote.
Commissioner Cavello, what is your vote?
I am not going along with the motion for fear that we might be violating the law.
Okay, so you're opposed.
I have 12. Yes, thank you.
Commissioner Knox?
And Commissioner Knox? What did he say? Commissioner Knox, are you in favor of Commissioner Jacobs' motion or opposed to it?
Reading his lips, he said opposed, I think. Did you say opposed, Ty?
I can't.
Reading his lips, he said opposed, yes, I did, but why don't you just wave your hand, Seymour? There you go.
So what's the vote? The motion is not carried. Now, Commissioner DiOrio? Commissioner DiOrio?
I can hear you. There's some interference on the line, but I can hear you now, Madam Chair.
Okay, so do I understand that your motion is a motion to retire to executive session and then authorize the commission to report out the result of our vote that is taken in executive session?
That's correct.
Is there a second?
And Matt, I add, as long as we don't violate any confidentiality.
Correct.
Well, once we authorize, correct.
I second that motion.
Second the motion?
Question?
Yes.
Commissioner Rath indicated that she would release her vote. Does the judge's motion envision that?
Can I interrupt?
That we would-
Gary, out of your office, we're getting a beeping noise that...
Yeah. We're getting interference out here, and I missed the last 3 to 4 minutes of conversation.
Okay, I'm going to ask Commissioner Bulgaro to move closer to the mic there and repeat what you're saying.
I was asking whether your motion envisions Commissioner Rath's decision to release her vote. Does your motion envision releasing how each member voted?
I think that's an issue to be decided by each commission member, Pat. And
Okay.
I have no problem with it personally, not at all.
Fair enough.
And tangentially, with regard to the motion, I do want and to express the concern of everybody that we do take the time and counsel ourselves with respect to all of these remaining issues, whether they're those expressed by Commissioner Jacobs or by Ellen Yarashevsky or myself or any of the others. We should do that. And to the extent that when we do that in closed session, we are able to combine and issue a statement with regard to processes that do not go counter, much less violate, the confidentiality and the nature of the statute as it impels us to keep things confidential so that nobody is in trouble.
Okay. Did we have a second to Commissioner DiOrio's motion? Any in favor? Aye.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4. So DeFiore, Hormozy, Rath, Horowitz, Levine. Who else? John, call them off for me. Knox. Who?
Knox.
Covello, are you in favor?
Favor.
In favor.
Renzi.
Who's next?
Is Renzi?
Commissioner Renzi?
DiOrio's in favor. Renzi?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any opposed?
Did we get Seymour Knox's vote?
Yeah.
Yes, we did. None opposed?
I didn't
Are
see
you abstaining?
Yarashevsky's vote.
Abstaining.
I'm abstaining.
So Commissioner Bulgaro is abstaining, Commissioner Jacob is abstaining, Commissioner Weissman is abstaining.
Yarashevsky.
Commissioner Yarashevsky, what is your vote?
I suppose I have to abstain. I support the idea of reporting out. I don't support the idea of going into executive session. So I suppose that counts as abstaining. I'm not sure what it counts as.
What's the vote?
Abstaining. Vote is, it carries by 1, 2, 3. I have 9 in favor and 4 abstaining.
Okay, the motion is carried. Thank you. Now, is there a motion to retire to executive session pursuant to Executive Law 9419B to attend to investigative matters?
I'll move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Rath, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Could John please call off the names of everyone in the box?
Commissioner Levine,
Commissioner Levine? Are you in favor of retiring to executive session?
Yes.
Commissioner Knox?
Commissioner Knox? Yes. Commissioner Cavello?
Yes.
Commissioner DiOrio?
Yes.
Commissioner Yaroshevsky?
No.
Who's next? Commissioner Renzi?
Yes.
Yes.
Did all three of you vote in favor?
Yes. Yes.
In
In favor?
No.
Opposed? Okay, Commissioner Bulgaro is opposed, Commissioner Jacob is opposed, Commissioner Weissman?
Abstaining.
Commissioner Yaroshevsky is opposed or abstaining?
Opposed.
Okay. What do we have?
7, 8. I'm missing one. 1, 2, 3. I do. Cavello.
Cavello's in favor.
Okay, then I got it.
Carried? The motion is carried.
May I make one final statement?
Yes, of
I want
course.
to thank you, Madam Chairperson, and the other commissioners for indulging us in this discussion. And this should be obvious to everybody who is in this room who is not a commissioner and not part of the staff as to how we operate. We discuss things. We discuss them intelligently. Sometimes we vote for them, sometimes we vote against them, sometimes we abstain. But this is a good, intelligent, collegial group that most of the time sees eye to eye on things. When we differ, we do it. We do it gentlemanly, ladylike, and I thank you all.
Thank you. We are now retiring to executive session.
Let's go back. Okay. Now, yeah. Zach. Okay.
John, just let me know when we're ready.
We're ready.
Okay, having completed our executive session of this meeting and returned to the public portion of the meeting, I report the following. At our last meeting on September 7th, the Commission had a discussion about a generic process issue. That issue having resolved, the Commission unanimously voted today to commence a substantial basis investigation pursuant to Executive Law 94-13A. That concludes my public comment and report out from the executive session. May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Remote commissioners?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The motion is carried. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.